interesting, you notice it's got that purple jewel drilled into the taillight lens. We all did that. We did it with our hot rods, we did it with our motorcycles. It's got an add-on backrest, looks to be a Harley-Davidson item, actually. The seat is in great condition, not a crack in it. Of course, last year the Ironhead, of course they had disc brakes, front and rear. This one's got this add-on running light, this purple running light, but although it looks like it was never hooked up. Has no battery. I checked the primary, it does have primary oil. I checked the engine oil, it does have engine oil. The spark plugs are a little rusty, but not too bad. Everything looks to be intact. Some of the wiring's been cut into, which you totally expect on a bike this age, but it doesn't look too bad at all. It has an add-on J&P tach and an add-on J&P cycles speedometer, and it says it's got 743 miles on it, but it's got more than that. Who knows? The handlebars have been changed. It's got the original controls. It's got the original headlight. It's got the original front ends, not been changed. It does have different levers that have been put on it. These handlebars are different. They've been internally wired. Everybody thought that was a great idea. It's not a great idea if you break down the road and you've got a short inside these. You can't fix it. We'll move around here onto the other side. Let's look at the fuel tank here. I think you could see it. It's pretty rusty and it smells like turpentine. Woo! Yes, it does. Looking down on the carburetor side of the engine, I had a brass one of these on my first Harley-Davidson 1978 Super Glide. I bought for $500 bucks. It was a rolling frame and 5 milk crates. This one is a brass one that looks just about like the one that was on that Super Glide, and I had to have it. This thing has slash cut drag pipes. Starter looks to be intact. This is an add-on chrome oil tank, an add-on chrome chain cover, chain guard, add-on chain guard. And it's got a lot of play, but I think it works. The rear brake, all in all, I'd say this bike is a great candidate for a revival. You gotta have spark, you gotta have fuel, and you gotta have compression. Where I think we're going to start on this Ironhead is we're gonna put a battery in it, gonna turn the key on. If it doesn't catch fire, we're going to try the starter and see if it'll roll the engine over. If it'll roll the engine over, we'll do a compression test, and if it has adequate compression, we will then move on to see if the coil has battery voltage at the coil. If the battery voltage is at the coil, then we'll go on and we'll check to see if it has spark. If it has spark, then we'll move on to fuel. We're gonna take this old tank off that smells like turpentine. We're gonna put the original tank back on it that still smells pretty decent, add a filter, then we're gonna pull the carburetor off of it. We're gonna put the carburetor up on the bench. We're gonna rebuild that carburetor, We're gonna put the carburetor up on the bench. We're gonna take it apart. We're gonna clean it. We're gonna replace whatever might need replaced in it, reassemble it, put it back together. Throw some decent fuel in this thing and see if it'll start. That is what I'm intending to do. Let's see what we can do. Let's put this battery in. Let me make a suggestion to you. When you put the battery in, a little tip from experience. Take your ring off. One time, I was taking a battery out of a motorcycle and I lit that thing up red hot. My finger was burnt all the way around. I had a Band-Aid all the way around my finger for more than a month. Second thing, always hook the positive up first. That way when you're hooking up the positive, you're not arcing. And when you're hooking up the negative, you're not arcing unless you touch a positive somewhere in the wiring harness. So let's go ahead and let's see if we can't get this done. Starter's in, no apparent fire, smoke, burning wires. Let's try the key and see what happens. Light comes on like it's supposed to. Let's try this starter and see if it'll engage and turn the motor over. 3 times, and that means it works. The battery's in, the engine turns over. Now, the compression test. I recommend, before you do the compression test, that you lubricate these cylinders. Myself, I use Marvel Mystery Oil. When I pulled this bike in after sitting for 10 years, the first thing I did was pull the plugs out of it, put about a teaspoon or 2 of Marvel Mystery Oil down each plug hole. That lubricates the cylinders. After years and years, there's no lubrication left. There's two ways we can do this. Number one, we can use a compression gauge. I was a dealership diesel engine mechanic for years. This is the way we do it. It's the right way. There's a second way. It's the old school way. You put your thumb over the top of the cylinder and turn the engine over. There's the back one. There's the front one. If it blows your thumb off there, you can't hold it on there, it's got enough compression to run. That's the way I did it for years. It's the way I still do it. It's the way old Harley guys did it and still do it. Side note, and a secret, these old Harleys, design-wise, they have more to do with an old Farmall H, that is, an old tractor, more in common than they do with modern internal combustion engines. These old engines, they're durable, they're reliable, and even they're not temperamental if treated right. They will go, and were designed to go, 100,000 miles with good maintenance. They made them right back in the day. This one's 39 years old next year. We have compression. Next, we're going to check if we've got power to the coil. Put your meter on volts, put your black lead on the negative on the battery, red lead on one of the studs on the ignition coil. Turn the key on, 11.74. Put it on the other one, turn the key on, 11.69, 67, 66. That's good. We've got power to the coil. You could also use a test light. So if you've got a test light or an inexpensive meter, even a $6 one from Harbor Freight will do just fine. Put your test light on a stud on the engine, turn the ignition light, comes on. Other one, same. We got power to the coil. Next, we check for spark. We got compression, we got power to the coil. Now we're gonna check to see if we have spark. So you can get one of these spark testers cheap on Amazon, less than 10 bucks. You can get them at Harbor Freight. You can take the spark plug out, you can ground it on a bolt on the head here and turn it over and see if it sparks. This is a lot easier, it's not expensive, more accurate. Plug that in, turn on the ignition, we should get spark here. We got spark. Next, we're gonna pull the carb and rebuild it. So here's the carburetor, and we are going to take the float bowl off the bottom of this carburetor. And when you take this apart, number one, be careful you don't lose any parts. Number two, be careful that you spray out with carb cleaner and then blow out with air every little port. If you don't, you will either not have an accelerator pump, or you will have where you got to run it with the choke to get enough fuel in it to make it run. I know about that. First time I ever had experience with spark, fuel, and compression was before I was 6 years old. I lived on a farm, and out in our chicken house that was a converted shop, we had a little purple mini bike with a white seat. And I wanted that thing to run in the worst way. So I set about trying to make it run. And I figured out that it had fuel, didn't smell good in the fuel tank, so I changed that. And by pulling it and having my hand on the spark plug wire, I figured out that it had spark. And then I went about trying to clean the carburetor. And I did the best I could with it on the engine. And I got it to start, but it would only run with the choke on. And I know now that's because I didn't have all the ports cleaned inside the carburetor. I think the main jet was clogged. So I got that thing running, and I jumped on it, and I gassed on it. And I pulled a wheelie and went straight into a barbed wire fence and wrecked. And I was so scared that somebody was gonna find out what I was doing and that I had wrecked that mini bike. I got it out of that fence, I wheeled it back into the chicken house, and I never told anybody until about a week ago. 52 years later, I told my wife, and now I'm telling you. Moral of the story, take your time, clean every port, and make sure that it's put back together correctly. It's all back together. We got spark, we got fuel, we got compression. It all comes down to this. Will it run? Well, I guess the guy who sold it to me wasn't lying. He said it was running when he parked it.